Welcome to the Efficient Spend podcast, where we help marketers turn media spend into revenue. My guest today is Maor Sadra. Maor, thank you for being here.
Thank you, Paul. It's an honor. Thank you for inviting me.
Very excited to chat with you. I was hoping that you could give the audience just some context into who you are and also your experience with optimizing marketing spend.
Cool. Hey, Paul. So I'm Maor Sadra. That's how you pronounce my name. Maor, by the way, means the moon and the sun in Hebrew, if you were ever wondering. I've been in marketing technology for some time now. And for those who watch us in video, you see gray hair here. This is like 20-something years of marketing technology. I've pretty much grew from the bottom up. I've spent like a decade on the web days and then made the smart switch to mobile. And yeah, I would say that like through my entire career was mostly on the media side, a little bit on the marketing side myself. Previously, I was CEO for a company called Uplift, which is a performance network out of Germany and with 15 other offices. And then a little bit more than 2 years ago, I co-founded a company called Incremental. Incremental is a SaaS platform that is a measurement solution for incrementality without needing user level data. And as you can imagine, our timing was pretty good. No user level data measurement. Around the same time, Apple announced ATT. And yeah, Incremental is scaling nicely. I recently also moved to Israel as the team is growing and I couldn't do the remote thing forever. I was in Germany before that.
Yeah. Yeah, and I became introduced to Incremental last year after listening to you on a podcast with Singular. Singular does a great job with content, and they really accelerated that after the changes on iOS. And we've been working together for about 7 to 8 months now, I would say, leveraging Incremental's platform at Self. So I have some firsthand experience into the tool. To give the audience a sense of scale of Incremental, roughly how much spend has gone through the platform at this time?
So I would say I need to check the latest figures, but anywhere between 2 and 3 billion so far. Like, just remember that again, the product is out in markets only since September 2021. So we do see, I think, a nice sizable amounts. And I could also mention in terms of scale, like Incremental is not like a vertical specific or medium specific. So today we have customers across 12, I think, verticals. This is like fintech, gaming, education, health, mobility, travel. I don't know, like you name it, I think we have like customers in that vertical. And again, we see mobile, web, influencers, linear TV, connected TV, billboards. We even have one customer who measured World Cup sponsorship and like crazy mega like TV global campaigns. So yeah, while we're still relatively small as a startup, like we have some good like logos, I would say, already using the platform.
For sure. $2 to $3 billion of spend optimized or analyzed is a big number. And I'm sure that there are a number of learnings that marketers could get from looking at that spend. The main value prop and the main reason that we went with Incremental is this ability to essentially measure anything that we want regarding marketing spend. And the thing that you've bet on more than anything else is using a specific type of incremental measurement called causal inference, right? There are multiple ways to measure marketing spend, multiple ways to measure incrementality. Why this big bet on causal inference? It's kind of what you've shaped your entire company around, right? So why this big bet?
To specify, by the way, I would say the kind of like methodology is around causal data science. Causal inference, by the way, might be a little bit like confusing because causal inference is also a specific model, by the way. But I would say causal data science, which is pretty much kind of like the methodology we utilize, is all about understanding effect and the cause that caused this effect. So your user base grew in a certain OS or a certain market, And essentially what we're doing is rather than attributing anything on a user level, we're attributing to the change, okay? So you've started a massive TV campaign. We saw now more conversions than what was predicted to have happened if it wasn't for this TV campaign. That's essentially what we are attributing, if we use that keyword. Now, again, coming obviously from like 20 years of marketing tech, I've always known of like how you could do an incrementality test, which is pretty much standards. Like you have the randomized control group or A/B testing. You show half the users an ad and half the users PSA, and try to compare, are the users that are exposed performing, in parentheses, better than the users that aren't. Now, the challenge with this methodology was always there, that like as a marketer, you could only do it on a single platform where you can do this audience split, okay? Only on Facebook. And then as a marketer, you needed to really, really do mental gymnastics to tell yourself, you know what? The users I'm not showing ads to, they're not seeing ads anywhere else. Those users on Facebook, they don't go on Google.
Right.
And they don't use TikTok, and they don't use Snapchat, and they don't watch TV. It's as almost as, like you want to believe that like every single channel has this like planet of users, and there is no interstellar travel between, which again is kind of like, I think again, 20 years of digital marketing where like we all relied on attribution data, where it really showed nicely like this line is Google, this line is Facebook, and so on. Like had us start thinking that this is really the picture, but Google has 96% market share. Right. Technically speaking, any marketer in the world could just put their money on Google and they're fine. Like you reach everyone. Now, this was one way like that we didn't like about this methodology. But second, of course, was what Apple did. It basically killed this methodology. You just can't do that anymore. Now, the other methodology, which actually for me was one of the inspirations of the company, was what is called geolift testing. Like any marketer in the world could tomorrow morning just stop marketing and wait and understand how much organics you have without paid marketing. And then restart channel, measure the delta, next channel, measure the delta, and so on. So any marketer could do that. There's like a couple of challenges with this methodology. One is like you not marketing means you don't market. And sure. for me, the like stop marketing to measure marketing sounds absurd. But more importantly, this methodology basically assumes that nothing else affects your performance other than paid marketing. So promotion, seasonality, changes in the world, changes in users' behavior. Essentially, it basically says, you know what, December and January are the same months. Okay. Which, again, we thought that this methodology doesn't really make sense. So we had to come up with another way. And this other way for us was causality, and another understanding, which was pretty obvious, that like marketers make tons of changes already. And as long as we can log the changes, we could build models around them.
Right. The idea of, did this change in our media mix result in incremental conversions, is an interesting one. I also think about the holistic nature of a media mix and a customer journey, somebody seeing multiple ads to convert, and how do you actually determine what was the thing that ultimately persuaded them to make the decision. Have you seen discrepancy between things that are measured as not incremental on your platform, but having that same spend change leading to click-based or view-based conversions? And how do you think about that discrepancy? Meaning, we know we spent in this area, it showed up as not being incremental based on your methodology. We saw that that spend led to people that were clicking on ads and then converting. What do we do with that, right? How do we determine, should we be spending more here or should we not be spending more in this area?
Cool. So like two things I want to actually address. So I'm going to start with your specific question.
Yeah.
If you're a brand and you're a relatively well-known brand with a unique brand name, if you tomorrow morning open a massive campaign on Google targeting your keywords, attribution will show you a lot of conversions. It's just obvious. When people are going to Google your name, if you're a well-known brand, people will see, oh, wow, and first link, I'm just going to click it. You're just going to get a lot of conversions as reported, as attributed, like using clicks, using impressions, and so on. But in reality, I think both you and I might agree that these conversions are likely not incremental, means you would be getting those regardless. Now,
Sure.
I would say, like, what we are basically showing here is, again, we're measuring the incrementality. Did this action of opening this campaign cause you to gain more conversions that you would have if it wasn't for this action? But the interesting and kind of like confusing part here is that attribution reporting, telling you all these conversions were attributed to your brand keyword campaign, attribution is correct. They did get attribute.
Sure.
Okay? They're just not incremental. So it's quite a different view. And I want to address it like a different point you mentioned. So 3+ years ago, my vision was I'm going to build the best multi-touch attribution solution. So I had like decks and ideas to how could we tap into users' proximity location and like proximity to other users that might have the same product. How could we basically build like a 3-dimensional physical device graph that would basically tell me everything about you as an individual, and then I can infer in retrospect, oh, wow, you converted because of this. Now, here there are like 2 things that stopped me. One was that like offline, like how would you like ingest that the user, I don't know, saw a billboard ad or saw a TV ad, linear TV.
Sure.
But second was this notion is like, does it really make sense to collect so much data to answer such a simple question? Like, why did the user do something? And you know what? Even with that, we wouldn't know. Like, because there are certain products that you could necessarily maybe infer like an action to an action, like a click to a conversion. But once you start thinking a little bit more complex user funnels, and fintech would be perfect for this. Think automotive, like you didn't see a banner and went and bought a car. It just doesn't work like that. Right. Maybe some statistically like do,
A
but
great banner.
yeah, it's like an awesome banner. But the point is, again, it's like all the like user level tracking in the world wouldn't still tell me the simple question, why did this user do this? And honestly, I don't think we would ever actually know in like statistics and with tracking. The world is not going there, and I wouldn't want to be in that like world. Like,
yeah. One of the big things that I've noticed after working with you is just the problem that is spend cannibalization and how big of a problem that actually is, because of advertisers relying on attributed data. What you have is marketers running these campaigns in Google and Facebook and TikTok optimized towards direct response. All of this media spend, and a lot of it in automated audiences going towards these direct response events. But like you said, how much of that is reaching the same users over and over and over again? You can do as much as you want around excluding different audiences and things of that nature. But the fact remains, those individual pixels are not talking to each other. That multi-touch problem is very hard to solve. And so what do? One of the outcomes that I've begun to internalize is, okay, you need to optimize towards net new users and reaching net new users. And in a lot of cases, a media mix may skew towards performance where you should actually incorporate more upper funnel reach-based media into it. You mentioned billions of dollars in spend going through your platform. What kind of massive changes do you see advertisers making, 3-6 months after using Incremental? What are they cutting? What are they reinvesting into? I wonder, what kind of actions you see as a result of Incremental?
So I think there it's not necessarily a bias, but currently Incrementally is very much inbound based. Like we don't go and try to convince those who are not convinced. So, and I want to comment on that specifically. It's like we have onboarded in the past customers where incrementality will often show a rather glim picture. Means, hey, things are not as good as you think they are. They're not necessarily as bad as you think you are, but here are channels where like you're not getting this amount of value you are actually thinking you're getting. Because in a way, one thing you need to remember, this entire industry is in a way skewed towards this like direction where the media vendors, even if they're the best media vendors in the world, again, let's name some name, like we're talking about Google, we're talking about Meta, we're talking about TikTok and so on. These platforms are all built to get postbacks. Hey, I generated a conversion to you. And based on that, these platforms are now trying to look for similar users for you. Now, with this entire system, okay, is built around, I'm getting a postback that tells me, hey, I've gotten you fish. I'm just going to look for more fish. These platforms don't necessarily know that they're now fishing in your backyard, okay? Why go out to the ocean when you can just, yeah. Now, in a way, I would say it's not out of evilness or something like that. It's literally how the system is like built. Now, since we're moving towards this like privacy-centric world and you start seeing more of the vendors actually looking for how could I actually ensure value, which would be incrementality, the challenge there is that the system is not yet built to kind of accept, hey, this is what I've generated for you based on attribution data, but this is how much you actually got based on incrementality. The system is going towards that like direction, I would say. But to your actual question, so again, companies who come or like inbound and they like know what they're looking for usually are quite eager to find those efficiencies. And I would say first, like last couple of months definitely have been more about efficiencies. Like when we'll ask companies, hey, do you want to? It's really about efficiencies because financial markets change. The market is now understanding that the true cost per conversion has never been cents. It's usually been in the dollars or more. And to understand that, again, to really generate growth takes a lot more effort than what people thought. It's not just let's start a campaign and set a CPI goal and hope for the best. Or not, we don't even need to hope for the best. We need to actually start doing a little bit more work and understanding audience behavior, creatives, and so on.
Right. Do you think that the incremental tool can help to kind of validate a more full funnel media mix?
Yeah, for sure. Companies use that all the time. Because again, it's like one thing, I don't know if I'm sometimes too honest for my own good, but I will say to people, hey, value is relative. Performance is relative. Okay. No channel is going to be forever good and forever bad, or a channel might be good for you and bad for a competitor and vice versa. The same channel might be great in January and horrific in December. And again, like decision-making when it comes to mix are not like a one-off. It's not like this channel is good, this channel is bad, I should spend this amount. Like you need to consistently look at what is the value I'm getting now and what direction should I be going? Up or down, up or down, up or down, all the time. And that needs to be dictated based on your overarching strategy. Are we trying to reduce cost per acquisition? Are we willing to scale at the cost of user acquisition? Those are like strategic questions that companies usually should come with already. Otherwise, it's just exploration. And exploration will often show people a rather gleam reality where like 20-30% of your ad spend is wasted, sometimes more.
Right. Coming into the partnership and onboarding the tool with an idea of the goals that you want to achieve brings me to my next question. So the way that I've thought about incremental and the way that I feel a lot of companies leveraging your software think probably, okay, we want to test all of these different things. Let's come up with a list, build a G sheet. Here are the things that we think might not be incremental that we want to test that are really incremental. And there's a lot of ways to slice that data on the campaign level, on the source level, on the OS level. on the funnel level, right? Should we be doing more upper funnel stuff or lower funnel stuff? Should we be doing retargeting? I wonder, when advertisers come to you and they're thinking about coming up with this budget testing framework to assess where they should be making their bets, do you have any feedback or any thoughts on how they should be thinking about that?
I would say it's like usually when it comes to like we see it as there's a way to validate the platform because we are in predictive analytics. So it's quite important sometimes for companies to kind of like vet the models because you want to know that the models are not BSing you.
Sure.
Yeah. And once it goes to that, again, it's kind of like understanding what you actually want to see from a strategy standpoint. Again, scaling up, scaling down is kind of like the overarching strategy. But then I would say it's always about like dissecting every single activity in every single level. And what I can tell you that I've been surprised multiple times. I had a strong bias towards brand keywords, thinking that most of the time it's not incremental and cannibalization and so on. I've seen cases where it was, I've seen cases where it wasn't. I try to come up with some kind of a framework when brand keywords are incremental and when not. But again and again and again, data has often like proved me wrong, and that my own personal biases don't necessarily mean anything to actual measurement. Same goes for like TV, like linear TV. Connected is a small part. I actually assume that like linear TV and TV as a whole would be pretty much amazing across the board, but I can tell you that there's verticals I've seen that I've never seen like TV campaigns doing anything good for them. And again, from a like almost kind of like an opinion standpoint, my strong opinion was like TV works for everybody. It doesn't work for many, it doesn't work for everybody. Yeah, so I think what I learned the most is that there's no one rule fits all at all.
Right. Which is not always the answer you want to hear as a marketer. We want things to be simple, right? We just want to know we should be spending more on TV or we shouldn't. And the answer is it depends. You need to measure it. And it might work for you now. It might work for you in 6 months. And you're really not going to know until you test it and measure it. Did want to go back to kind of this conversation that we're having around how do we leverage multiple sources of measurement to come to a more holistic understanding of our mix. Because I personally think that while incremental is one read that we can do to measure marketing spend, it's only one. And I do still rely on attributed data, things like geo-testing, right? One of the other things that I'm starting to think about more, which I honestly haven't done in the past as much, is relying more on survey-based data, right? Customer surveys. I know that you're working a lot on this one result, right? The read that we're getting in incremental. How do you think that advertisers should think about all of these different measurement sources, right?
I'm with you. I think that the smart marketer would never utilize a single methodology.
Right.
And it's also use cases. So take real-time attribution data, okay? It's real-time, that's literally the word has it. And while it's last touch and has a lot of caveats, last touch at least normalizes everything. Like MTA was my dream, but MTA is crazy difficult to build. I would probably also say impossible in today's world, but let's say if you had the user level data, it's quite difficult to build. And then once you've added a new medium into the picture, whatever MTA logic you had is broken. You need to now redo it. So I think last touch is great because it normalizes everything. Okay, last touch, they get the credit. Now, last touch is awesome for things like A/B testing audiences, creative testing. Like if you have two creatives, one is blue, one is red, and the blue one has a better CTR and CR, it's better. It's like you don't need any other like data points to really tell you this one is working better. Okay, statistically speaking, again, maybe like we can say that maybe at certain situation the red one with the lowest CTR and a lower CR would work, but generally speaking, the first one works. Now, when it comes to survey, again, if like we could just ask users what brought you here and they give us an answer, that's awesome. Now, when it comes to kind of like methodology, you want as many inputs pointing towards you're making the right decision.
Mm-hmm.
If it's last touch and incrementality and survey base, and now let's also add MMM to the picture, then you're pretty much covered. And again, every single methodology has different pros and cons and caveats and use cases specifically, but the smart marketer at a certain scale is going to be utilizing everything and not a single, like I'm just going to go all in with last touch. Last touch, if you go all in with last touch, I have an analogy for this. It's kind of like running a sports team where you only pay the person scoring to the point where you fire everybody else. Yeah, just not how marketing works.
Yeah. There is some credit to assign to that last touch, but not 100% of the credit. It seems like multi-touch would be the best thing, but the data sources and availability makes it just super complicated and difficult to actually do. Right.
Yeah, exactly. I think it's just not necessarily worth it. So like building an MTA takes crazy amount of investments. Like again, data sources. Data science, machine learning, gathering the data, building the warehouse, to answer such a simple thing that you still might be wrong about.
Right.
And it needs to get updated all the time. And then you need to work with fractional. And again, depending on your conversion, like funnel, it might only give you the picture like 14, sometimes longer days after the fact. Last touch, it's there.
I know that a big thing that you're a champion of is using your source of truth data, meaning taking attribution out of it, right? Maybe if you'd like, just talk through the incremental onboarding process at a high level, because it was super simple when we did it. I don't know if it's changed at all, but for marketers looking to test the platform, what do they need to get started, right?
Yeah, so generally what we need is we need ad spends, like everything, TV, digital, whatever, typically on a campaign level. And we can also pull it directly from most of the platform. And for anything else, like offline, 7 out of 10 is going to just put it on a Google Sheet. That's like the most common way to integrate. I always say it with a smile because I actually was shocked when we had the first very large company that said, can we put it on a Google Sheet? Yeah. Second data point we need is the marketing KPIs in aggregate form only. So let's say you want to measure signups, then we would ask you to give us signups by day, by country, by platform, iOS, Android, web, retail, whatever. Now, technically speaking, we don't really care about how much whatever form of attribution says Facebook generated, Google generated, TikTok generated, TV generated. It's irrelevant for us. We are literally doing something quite different. Then once you basically get to this granularity, the main reason why we ask people hey, give us whatever you deem as your source of truth is that if, I don't know, tomorrow your attribution gets bombed with bots and you suddenly see 1 million more signups, I don't want that. Technically, again, I can get it. And if you clean your data retrospect, I can overwrite that. But I just want to deal with the data that you deem is the most accurate.
Right.
That's why totals make it quite simple. The only reason why some companies would want to give us their attributed data is mainly just on the platform from a cosmetic standpoint, see what attribution says, what incremental says. But generally speaking, we don't really care.
And so you're ingesting the spend data and then this aggregate data at scale. We started working with you. You're a newer company, right? And now you're scaling. I think you raised around last year, right? And you're continuing to hire more. Did the rebrand this year, which is super awesome. From a product development perspective, how does Incremental get better? How do you start to take advantage of this larger and larger amount of spend data, conversion data that you're getting? Is it able to, how does it get better so that all marketers can benefit. What does incremental look like in 5-10 years at this scale, right? I'd love to just learn about that because it seems like, and I'm not a data scientist, but my bro science basics understanding is more data equals better, right? So what do you do with that, and how does that improve the product?
Interesting. So I would say that currently there is pretty much no cross-customer learning. So more data better is more towards the individual customer rather than cross customers. We did do at some point like a research around 30,000 app featurings on app stores just to figure out that only one type of featuring really makes an impact. Okay. But generally speaking, there's like no real cross learning. Maybe from a domain knowledge, again, we would like, for example, we know as a team now, and the data shows us that gaming has a peak during like Christmas, for example, but we actually don't apply it in the model. So there is no bias in the model. There is a model consideration for holidays, but if the model will basically see that for your gaming company, for example, there is no like more observed conversions during Christmas, the model will say, you know what, I don't care about the scoring. I'm sticking to what I see. But I would say kind of like from a product standpoint, where incremental will be. So there is one area which is the onboarding. Like indeed, we built it in a way where it's quite simple. So we want to take it self-service. Like anyone can just onboard themselves. It should be quite simple and just allow people to like experiment with the platform without any like before they need to even consider like subscription, no subscription, and so on. So that's one area. But the more interesting areas is one is autonomous, which is a feature we launched recently, which basically says, hey, you don't need to measure stuff. Here's the results. Okay, autonomous is a little bit more simplified for the, I would say, average marketer or CMO who want to just make decisions. They like, okay, they already got the modeling, they trust the modeling, they just want the data, like the results. That's one area. The other bigger area we're heading towards is what we call a ground truth. So today, as a company called Incremental, we're measuring the incremental value. You've scaled up on Google, here's the incremental value. Ground truth will basically say, here is the value, not here's the incremental value. Here's the value of Google. Total ground truth means that we are essentially going towards the attribution space from an incrementality standpoint, but without the use of user level data and being omni-channel. So for brands who are active on multiple channels, which today they only have point solutions. You have a mobile measurement solution, you have a web measurement solution, you have a TV measurement solution. But if you sum the three, you end up with something that is way above your, so that's an area. I would say anything else from a product standpoint is always dictated by customers. Like, we had a first customer said, hey, I'm like, my marketing performance is affected by weather. Why not consider weather within the models? And then we added support for like weather data. So I think that now more than half the features are because someone said, this is relevant for me, or like, oh, could also be relevant for everybody else. So we definitely listen to what people tell us.
The moving towards that ground truth is super interesting and timely. One of the challenges that I've had in thinking about how to use incremental is this idea of, is the spend change that we're making large enough to detect a change? Because I know your point of view on this is the spend change needs to be large enough within the spend that you're changing. I think to myself, it needs to be large enough to show up within the total media mix. If you're spending $100,000 a day and you want to see if Facebook is incremental, sometimes I think, is spending $1,000 more on this campaign going to show that? Or do we have to spend as an overall percentage of our media mix to understand that?
Most of our effort is to allow you to measure even the small changes. I think, again, if you're only trying to measure the big changes, you don't need an incremental for that. You have Excel. And again, it's like that's one of the problems essentially with MMM technology that we're not big fans of, is that you need to make drastic large changes and wait in order to run your MMM. So imagine again, as a marketer, you now decided to test a new channel, and you started a new channel. Attribution is showing you crappy results, pardon my French. MMM basically says, hey, you need to wait now for a month at least before I tell you if this new channel was worth it. I don't know any marketer who will be willing to say, you know what? Yeah, you're like, I'm just gonna wait. And again, if you always remember, like MMM comes from like the retailers, the big brands of the world who are not direct to consumers. Okay, when you are a brand and you're selling through retail chains, you have absolutely no touches with your audiences. Actually, you can run surveys, and again, you've used Nielsen, and you had all these like legacy methodology, and MMM was perfect for you because you also had like 20, 30 years of historical data to overlay. Like I think that most of our customers are definitely like companies born in the last 10 to 20 years. And MMM is just not practical and not useful for them.
Right. And they more than likely will be relying on some combination of using measures from incremental and then attributed data, something like that. I do want to continue to kind of like poke and prod. I know that, your perspective is it really depends on the advertiser and what's incremental and not. Are there any just, outliers or spend changes that you've seen that you just think, hey, advertisers on the whole may be spending too much on Facebook or may not be spending enough in offline, et cetera?
So like a couple of like high level analysis I could share with you. So generally speaking, Facebook was hurt the most by Apple's change. So like we see a lot of companies who post ATT cut Facebook because they thought I'm getting like $100 cost per install on mobile. Incremental reality shows a very, very, very different picture. That's like one generic observation. The other one is what is called like seasonal adjustments on Google. So I think here there's like 100 years of habit basically saying, hey, Q4 spend more. Data has often showed us, nope, if you're getting like peak seasonality thanks to the holiday, put your budgets into your profits. You're literally now enjoying a peak seasonality. And here you can always claim the counter argument, if we spent more, we might have gotten more, which is almost kind of like addiction.
Right.
Yeah. So we've seen a lot of people who basically like spend no matter what in certain peak moments. And we've seen ones who've massively enjoyed higher profits thanks to optimizing against seasonal moments as well. It means lower my spend, cap my bids. Google has a feature for this. It's called seasonal adjustments. It's hidden somewhere within AdWords. But you can actually even instruct the model, hey, do something different because of my seasonality. That's a really cool feature that most of the people I spoke with had no idea this existed.
Now a few people might. Last couple of questions. This is called the Efficient Spend Podcast. So what is the most efficient spend that you've made in media spend, and what's the most inefficient personally?
Wow, most efficient, you're taking me like a long time in the past, was like an email shoot in Germany in my golden days as a media director at an online gambling company. This was like a crazy high quality email shoot list that was by far generated the most amount of like high paying users for the company. Crazy ROAS, like in the thousands, that all remained with the company. I don't know who those users were. Probably the company did, because they all made it to what we call VAP5. VAP5 was people who were spending more than 200,000 on this game. Yeah, the most efficient by far. Most inefficient was a mistake I once did, not setting bit caps on Google, and burned through $75,000 over a course of 12 hours. Woke up, got a call from my boss. Didn't fire me, just told me never again.
Never again. Cool. Thank you so much, Maor. This was great. And yeah, have a great day.
Thank you too.